All right, I'm ready. Let's go.
Cool. And I'm posting the link. We're good.
Yep. Guys, in the grim, dark present of the 21st century, I am joined today for Coliseum Forum with one of my all-time favorite writers, Kieron Gillen. Sir, how are you doing today?
Guys, in the grim dark.
I'm very well. It's 9 o'clock here, so it's a little bit late in the day, but it's lovely to
join
have
today
you, Billy.
for Coliseum Forum. I guess how are we doing this evening would have been a better way to frame that, since you're all the way in the UK, right?
Now we're talking 40k, like time dilation and warp effects and all that kind of time stuff is entirely normal. So this is nothing.
Well, this is one of the. I mean, this is obviously the thing we want to talk to you about today with Warhammer. I understand you've been a fan of Warhammer forever, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a fan of Warhammer for almost as long as it's possible to be being a fan of Warhammer. Because it's almost like literally when puberty was hitting. It's like I was like, it must have been 86, I guess. So I was just going to secondary school, so I was being 11, 12, and I was into 40k like in 87 when it dropped. And it's kind of like, how to phrase? This is a period when you had to actually. There was no like game shops in my hometown, so you had to basically write off to Games Workshop, and they send you these big A3, maybe A2 letters of like, what are their models this month and what's on remainder. And like the first manual I bought was for, is it Warhammer Second Edition? It was a book called Ravening Hordes, which was their army lists. So I was reading their army lists, having no idea the rest of the rules. So I'm sort of sitting there like reading these tactical guides for a game I had no idea how to play. The reason I ordered that because it was on Reminder, so it was like the £2, and I was like, okay, I'll have that, So yeah, it was immediately a kind of like a crush, and I've been in and out of it like most of my life at different times.
Right.
Yeah.
So now that you're heading up Warhammer at Marvel, I'm guessing you've dipped your toes back in. We're back at one of those points in your life where you are participating.
It's very much, yeah. I mean, I've been sort of quietly Warhammering since actually I did a mini for Boom back in 2008, and that was the thing that got me. My wife bought me a box of Skaven clan rats, and I think she bought it as a joke, and I took it as permission.
Yeah.
And I've sort of been and I ended up like painting them, not those 20, but painting Skaven for about like 3 years, and I ended up like 300 of them. And sort of thinking, I probably should play a game now again. And then I've sort of ambled like through the last decade, painting various things. So yeah, this is more like the climax of my last weird decade of painting Warhammer and playing it and like following the scene again. And it's been a really very cool and interesting period in Warhammer history, in terms of the games they put out and the ways that just the things that Games Workshop have done, which have been just very cool to be watching and now kind of being part of,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so that leads me to my next question. With something like Warhammer, it started in 1987. Somehow there's a license agreement between Marvel and Games Workshop, and then you get involved, which is absolutely, I can't imagine a better writer doing these books. Do you go to the Games Workshop offices and they just drop a 40-pound like story Bible on you, or where do you start on trying to figure out the lore, especially with a character like Marneus Calgar?
Yeah, I mean, in the case of like, I occasionally feel like I'm the Warhammer whisperer in between. Like, obviously, Warhammer is like, it's a big thing all over the world, but it's such a bigger thing in the UK.
Absolutely.
And of course, like the Marvel editors may not know as much as I do. In fact, they don't, as in they're kind of new to it. And then, but also, like, Games Workshop don't know how comics work as much. So I'm sort of like translating. I remember sort of saying, in my pictures at Marvel, I was sort of saying, well, see, imagine Loki as a kind of a chaos, Loki meets Lovecraft,
Right.
And then like, translating all the characters into Marvelese, which has kind of been quite, and also vice versa, which is a fun thing to do. No, I didn't get an enormous download. I mean, there was a big download. I've got access to, frankly, a scary amount of files, and they gave a lot to like Games Marvel. In my case, I do know a lot.
Right.
But the also thing is the canon changes, and like different things are important at different times.
Right.
I've had a couple of trips up. Like I went on a big trip up there to just generally go, sit down, talk about stuff broadly in terms of like that. I've had another meeting generally talking through very specific points of like what Warhammer is to them. Because the thing is, as a fan, or even like or even just especially like as a fan, you get to sort of define your own bit of 40k. Because it's an Imperium's like a million worlds, and you say, okay, my battles are on this one world, and this world is like this. You know what I mean? And that's still Warhammer 40k, and it's still tonally right. But it's kind of like if you're talking to Games Workshop, you're also like, what's the big picture? What's really quote unquote important? It's a bit like being a Marvel fan. It's like you can list out all of Wolverine's history, and obviously it all happened. But like, what were the core important moments? Like in terms, and that's kind of like what I do over at Marvel. Like you look at like the X-Men's history, and you choose, okay, a lot of things have happened, but what's the core important things about Cyclops? And so like the stuff that's sort of being taught to me by Games Workshop is, okay, what is important to them? Like, what's the core sort of message? And then, their core myths even. And and plus, a lot of this stuff I just knew anyway, because you know it by reading it.
Right.
Yeah. But and in the case of Marnius Calgar, it's like there was a list of sort of, these are sort of people who might be interested in seeing a story about. A lot of this stuff I just knew anyway, because you know Marnius Calgar seemed to really, and for me, as a comic person, and like somebody wants to try to basically evangelical about my London universe. So, okay, if I'm going to explain Marnius to somebody, I probably have to start with Space Marine. Because if somebody, imagine, if I was met you in a pub and you say, I don't know much about Warhammer, if they say, think about something Warhammer, you probably think of a Space Marine. It's just they are the quote unquote icon. So you kind of start there, and like Marnius Calgar is. I mean, the Ultramarines, are the
the poster children.
I said Paragon, but that's kind of not quite fair. They are like the template for Space Marines.
Sure.
So it was like people either like them or unlike them. Like people like the Blood Angels and the Space Wolves are kind of interesting because they don't follow the rulebook. Template. And
I was going to say.
Yeah,
so you get a shout out to the Space Wolves there.
Exactly. I love all the thing is people like the Blood Angels. Ultramarines aren't my chapter in that way, but I sort of recognise the don't follow the rulebook template. To understand why all the other stuff is cool, you need to understand what the core Space Marine idea is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you think, how do you explain that? Well, you probably and then you hit like who is the most definitive like Ultramarine? Well, it's Marnius, isn't it? So it's kind of like by showing this paragon of being a Space Marine, you can show by showing how this paragon became a Space Marine, you can also, as well as telling a cool story about this one person, you also learn about how Space Marines become Space Marines. So, I mean, the way our story sort of works is half it's set in the present day with this big old, an excitable present war and lots of stuff happening. And the other half is kind of, what he was like before he became a Space Marine. What's the training like? And when we get to like the training and especially the modifications, there's a lot of fun. I mean, a James Stokoe cover has just been dropped online, and it's one of this amazingly horrific piece of bisected body horror. It's great. But and by it sort of like you're telling this personal story about how Space Marines come to be, you're telling the story of this one guy, but also all Space Marines have their story a bit like this, and of course how Space Marines differ from the universe and how they fit into the Imperium, etc., etc. I mean, I've said this before, but like. Batman Year One is my sort of model in terms of like Batman Year One. Every single Batman fan loves Batman Year One because it's an amazing story and it says everything about Batman. And at the same time, it also is an introduction to Batman's universe. So that's kind of the idea, and you want to do something that absolutely sells to people who just want to tell us more about this Warhammer creature, but you also want to do something which is, oh yeah, I like Warhammer. I want to see what a Power Fist does to that guy's head.
Yeah,
that's my.
I was very, very worried that it feels like there's been a shift with Games Workshop where they're trying to make it a little fluffier, a little more inviting for everybody, which is great because there's room in that community for many more people. But with it being a Marvel title, I was really concerned, and I don't want to spoil too much about the book, that it would kind of get a PG kind of approach. And in the first, literally the first page is a chaos cultist getting a bolt around exploding them. And so I saw that, and immediately I was like, all right, it's Kieron Gillen. He knows what he's doing. He's got this. So I know now, understanding why you picked Marnius Calgar and the Ultramarines to kind of feature first. You did mention that they said, hey, these are some characters we would like to see. Was Was there any love for the Space Wolves considered there at all? I personally, as a Space Wolves player, I have to ask.
I couldn't possibly tell who else was on the list. It's that, like, you know what I mean? And it's always the bit like, you know, that would be spoilers in case there's other books. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Like, so I would rather not mention. Also, I can't remember. It's funny.
That also, person,
off the top of my head, there's only one person I remember on. Actually, there's two now. But I'm not telling you either, so I don't know why I'm keeping you.
So, if you've read the first issue, hopefully you have, and I'm going to take a second to plug this because we're so excited about your Warhammer book. We're running a promotion in our stores right now. If you spend $25 or more on any Warhammer product, so this is paints or miniatures, brushes, etc., you get your issue number 1 for free. So we've been running that promotion for about 2 weeks. We have a very dedicated, very loyal Warhammer community at some of our stores, our Fashion Square store and our Kissimmee store, specifically. How far into Marneus Calgar's story are we going to see this play out? Are we going to, like, by the time this is done, will somebody be like, yeah, I know pretty much this guy's life, or is it going to cut off at a certain point?
With the main two threads are, we've got the present day mission, like we kind of see the whole present day. He's come back to his home planet, and there's a surprise chaos incursion they can't explain, and that's like the major. So no, that's what's happening in this planet and what's going on. And that's the kind of the present day. To us, it's kind of like it's almost like a standard Marneus. This is Marneus Calgar's Wednesday. You know what I mean? It's right. It's personal because it's not his home world, but it's kind of here's just an example of what he does. And the past is like I wanted a broad slice for his life. So, well, issue 1 is very much like, just sort of like before, not even like being trained as a space marine, but they're kind of like heading towards being trained. Like, because I don't want to go through all the lists of the testings right now, but then you kind of go through his life. So, but issue 2 is about all the leading into that. Issue 3 is basically the I've got to remember where did I actually put this in this issue? But yeah, we go through. So I won't say which issue each stuff is in, but we go through the getting into the Marines, preparing for the tests, doing the tests.
So we very much get a Marneus Calgar year 1.
Yeah. But also you go into becoming a space marine. Then you also get a travel through his career. Like we don't get a lot. I do like these cameos. So you get like I've got some, because the thing about this is the other reason why Marneus Calgar's a really good character to use is, we know a lot of things he did, but there's a big gap. Like his whole like basically before he became chapter master is almost completely open. You know what I mean? So like what was he doing? You know, so there's lots of, like, as well as hitting his, shall we say, greatest hits, like, you know, a lot of it, because the great thing about doing a sequence where you do a bit like cameos or just a single scene, you get like Jason's, hey Jason, give me an avatar of Kane. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
For a panel. But at the same time, we also get to say, okay, what was what sort of missions was Marneus doing when he was just a normal Marine? You know, as well. So like that is like it's more like once you've gone past the training, it's more like tasters. Then you go right up to the present day.
Okay.
So yeah, as in like it's basically this is all the things that made this man, and this is where he is now. That's kind of where you end up, I think.
So I have 2 questions, and they're lore questions, so hopefully you can answer them, because I love the lore. I read a ton of it, but the Ultramarines are sort of a blind spot for me. Was Marneus around for the heresy?
No. He's much younger than that. He's only how old would he be now? I don't know off the top of my head. A few centuries. So
Gilliman's already in stasis by the time Marneus comes along.
Yeah, Gilliman's well. To be honest, like Gilliman's return is one of the things I mention in the story, and plus, like, I didn't like. There's always the questions like all the story sort of telescopes. So I try to introduce the stuff you need to know as you need to know it. But but by issue 3, I'm introducing the Primarchs and what happened to Gilliman. I mean, there's a scene where we've got a young Marneus inside the did I put it the Temple of Hera or not? Anyway, he's in the place where you've got the because that Gilliman's shrine is like him in stasis, and it's a whole church built around him, and millions of pilgrims go to it. So I definitely wanted that kind of the idea of you've got basically your hero figure like not in a box, but you got your hero figure here, and he has been frozen forever, and now he's awake. Now I haven't gone. There's none of the actual Gillen Marnius relationships or anything in the story, but that was always my thought in terms of because the religiosity and the size of Warhammer is important. Also the yeah. I mean that side, but at the same time I'm also leaning to the horror and awfulness of the thing I think is important not to lose in Warhammer for all the how much it is about combat, and there is the if people did not enjoy watching people get torn apart by a power fist, that's clearly part of the appeal. At the same time, clearly, if any of us were in the 40k universe, we would be dead.
Oh, it's awful. It is the worst. I mean, you touched on it in the first issue, and again, I don't want to spoil it too much, but you talked about how this is literally a farm planet meant to feed other systems in this planet or other planets in the system, and there are people on this planet that grow the food that are starving because literally. And this is how I explain it to people when they ask: is Warhammer, everything is awful. There are no good guys. Everything is terrible. It is literally the worst thing ever. But you should definitely play it because it's a lot of fun.
It's sorry, no matter how bad the world gets, it's kind of like, well, at least it's not that.
You can just see.
It's like
there's no high cities.
You think about where Warhammer came from, which is basically a group of mainly heavy metalers in the 80s being really annoyed with how Britain was, you know what I mean? Right. That kind of utter cynical frustration. That's absolutely the sort of soil which Warhammer grows from. And to us, I was a teenage metalhead of exactly that era. So it's there's a bit in Bill and Ted's, the second Bill and Ted, where Bill and Ted goes, they arrive in hell and they go, whoa, our album covers totally lied to us, dude. And I Warhammer is basically a universe where your album covers never lie to you. Right.
No, absolutely not. I mean, and then you kind of touched on the size and the scope of Warhammer. And I mean, it really is massive. I mean, I recently got a friend into the game and he's decided he's going to play the Eldar, and he's asked me and I'm like, I don't know. I play Emperor's Children. I play Space Wolves. I know a ton about those factions, but there's just so much going on in this universe. To know everything about every faction, you'd have to play for 30 years.
Yeah, and it's part of the appeal in that kind of there's factions I don't know. I personally don't know very well, and that's fun because maybe one day you'll go, oh, maybe I'll get into Tau, and I'll go down that hole. And in fact, it's a big, it's just a big universe, and the idea of and that's actually, as I said, part of the challenge is, okay, what's this story about? You got to make it specific enough to be interesting, but also not mislead people about other stuff. I mean, I do these data pages in the comic, and choosing.
I love those.
They're really. I'm very glad that John has got them into fashion. But especially with Warhammer, it's okay, what fact shall I put in this data piece? As you said, it's for describing the planets. It's a great way to, because since the book is mainly about combat, you don't really get how people live. So it's a great way to sort of make sure that people don't just think this is a good place. But at the same time, it's a way okay, do they need to know about who Primarchs are yet? How much do they need to know about the Horus Heresy? What, and that kind of you edit. And the thing about Warhammer is it is, as you say, fractal. Whichever hole you go down, there's infinite stuff down there. And that's fun, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I've disappeared down a hole down there.
So let me ask you this. No, that's okay. Yeah, it's what happens. So let me ask you this, and I know this is a question that a few people asked me to ask you. What is your favorite Warhammer faction?
Well, actually, the classic answer is Skaven, because I have
okay.
We're gonna take you on a walk. All right. Here are some Skaven. There's not all. I've had to put some away because I've ran out of shelf space. Then here are some Khornate stuff up here, and then there's some Warcry and assorted Slaneshi and other people's miniatures. These are my Space Marines here, and these are my Echelon. So yeah.
Oh, so we've got some Ultramarines there.
Yeah, they are. These are actually my own chapter. They're called the Chastised, which are they are actually. They have they're not a stupid origin. They have my own origin.
Okay.
and they are basically, I play them as Ultramarine successors, but they are they're really Emperor's Children Gene Seed rebooted and tried to be clean. Okay. So like they're an experimental small chapter, and they basically got a load of Ultramarines in charge to try to stop them rebelling again. So we'll see how that goes. It'll probably go badly because that's what happens in 40k. But yes, that
is correct. So they have the Phoenician Gene Seed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. As in, like, so I'm still with the new edition. I'm thinking about tweaking how I play them a bit. So like, or rather changing I have one of the Ultramarines ones and one of the something that feels a bit more like 30k. Oh, I've got my Sons of Horus over there. Okay, my classic 40k favorite army is actually the Imperial Guard. I don't play them anymore. They were my first army. I just really I've always liked the underdogs, and I played Imperial Guard when they had no tanks. I am that old. Like they just they were that just basically the idea of being a normal human in a world of superhumans really appeals in terms of the doomness of them. You know what I mean? Like my basic sort of British working classness really appreciates that. But you know, I tell you, my favorite, I'm not an Eldar fan, my favorite single weapon in 40k is the Harlequin's Kiss. Just because it's just so, basically, you are now a milkshake. Great.
For anybody tuning in, we're deep into the Warhammer now, which is what I was hoping would happen. But I will say this: give the idea of imagining being a guardsman in the 40k universe gives me actual anxiety. You're in a room in a universe, in a world that is literally just everything's a living nightmare. Everything from your daily life to everything else that's happening, because there are actual demons that just show up sometimes. And the idea that you're a human, and like you said, they are definitely the underdog because their guns are to as flashlights, and you're handed a set told monster made of fungus with this thing called a flashlight. But if you don't, this commissar is going to shoot you in the head. And so the guardsmen, I understand the everyman struggle, but for those guys, when I think about their existence, it genuinely gives me anxiety because it is terrifying.
I mean, the meat grind. I mean, it's one of the things about 40k.
Can you still hear me?
They will throw humans at the problem. That's like intellectually speaking. Like I mentioned the religiosity earlier, but it's a dark age setting. Like no one knows how the technology works. Or very few people know how the technology works. And like the Imperium's response to most things is maybe another person would do. Like there's a wonderful piece of art. I was looking at about hundreds of people dragging a torpedo into one of the guns aboard one of the ships. And that's still 50k. You know what I mean? Like I mean, you see that kind of stuff a lot, right? Where probably some servitors can handle this, but instead it's just guys in robes like hauling, nuclear material, whatever it is, warp material into the reactors so they can make a space jump. It's not a lot of great problem solving going on. Yeah, there's a lot of work in terms of what we're doing in the comic. We try to do a lot about there's a lot of scenes of manual work in the comic in the background. And partially it's like one reason the Mornis is basically teamed up with an Adeptus Mechanicus. And Adeptus Mechanicus is basically a sort of a cyborgy technological priest. And one reason is partially because they're a little, it gives you two very different voices, but also because he's much shorter. And also I try to put a lot of workers around because one of the things that makes Space Marines interesting is they are so much bigger than humans. But with the setting, you kind of like just have people walking around. And if you look at, even in the first issue, there's people at work and you'll see how they're working. They're not working necessarily in the most sensible manners. Then you've got the enormous combine harvesters that Jason has designed. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of that kind of like, how can you make it feel more Warhammery, I guess? Which is fun,
And I think this is probably my favorite thing about the book. And if you haven't read this book yet, please, guys, swing by a Coliseum or your local comic book shop, pick up a copy of this book, because if you even have a passing interest in the Warhammer universe, this is such a great primer. And as a longtime fan, I can tell you this stuff that because in terms of the art, I mean, we had the one movie back in the 2000s. There's been some other like comics and things like that, but some of the stuff that you've only read about in the novels or in flavor text for the lore, you're actually seeing in your book, which I think is, as the fan of the lore, like getting to see those things actually visualized for the first time is really important, and it makes the book that much more engaging than just like, oh, here's the Space Marine story.
So like, one of the things Jason talks about is how interesting it is trying to like visualize someone else's fantasy universe. You know, like, you know, he's a guy who's worked with literally the best. You know, he's worked with Alan Moore, he's worked with Garth Ennis, and he's used to like building from scratch, but working how to be essentially art director in a movie, as in, okay, this is what it looks like. How can I bring it to the page? And of course, Jason's perfect for it. Right. He's somebody who, obviously, he's drawn some really horrific comics. Like, he's a guy who's used to horror. So it's him. So he can take what he does, then kind of move it to something which is not that, because that is not what it should be, but like really kind of understand the physical nature of viscera. There's a lot of good stuff there. Sorry, I've gone down a hole there again. You were saying?
No, please go down the hole. This is literally a daydream come true. Talking to Kieron Gillen about his Warhammer comic, and then just nerding out about Warhammer. But I do want to move away from Warhammer for a second, because it's not the only book you've ever done. In fact, you've done some of, and I know from our customers and my standpoint, some of our favorite books. I mean, Die, Once and Future, Wicked and Divine. I mean, let me ask you this. You know, I know you've done work at Marvel, but you've done a lot of your own stuff. Do you have a preference between the two?
It's all about where your head, for me, I'm lucky enough to be able to say it's all about where your head is at the time. The real, like, in terms of like, this year I wanted to do more creator owned, and it partially because I didn't really, it stretches different muscles, and I didn't feel I had the muscles to do any more creator owned. Like, Ludicrous was coming out, Die and Once and Future still coming on. You know, there's still some Wick Diff floating around, and I'm like, no, actually, I kind of in the place, especially because they came to me and say, do you want to do like a Warhammer comic and Eternals? And I was like, yeah, actually, you know what I mean? As in, they were basically two things in work that I have not done. Like, one is doing a major book, tying in with the release of a new movie, and also building, a Marvel classic from the ground up, from scratch, for a new audience. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't done that before, like, for Marvel. And with the Warhammer stuff was, it was like, it wasn't just the fact I'm an enormous fan. There was like a few other things appealing in terms of like, let's try to work out how something like Warhammer could work in comics. But depending on and it does depend where my head is for the next year. I'm in the moment now. I'm trying to work out what do I want to do in 2021. You know what I mean? And obviously, I still have like X amount of Eternals, and I finished Marnius Calgar now, and Die. I've got to write the next arc, and Once and Future's ongoing. So I've still got a lot of stuff, but I can sort of see the space now. Right. The real answer, though, if I had to actually choose entirely and had one or the other, I would choose creator owned. And the reason why is, as much as I love the work for hire stuff I do, and the muscles it stretches, it's because that book would not exist without me. You know what I mean? Right. And I think the creator's, not duty, because I hate the word duty. It makes it like sound like it's holy. But, you know, I think bringing new things into the world, that, you know, the way you see the world and expressing as best you can is kind of like the most important thing for you. I mean, like, for me anyway. So, like, you know, if I was never born, there would be an Eternals book this year, but there wouldn't have been a Die. There wouldn't have been a Once and Future. There wouldn't have been a Program or a Wick Diff. And that kind of that very pure burst of you, that's the most important stuff for me. But I also know I could not do 4 books like that a month. You know what I mean? Sure. So like, absolutely. Like, and I couldn't even do like 4. The idea of like, you know, Die and Once and Future are such different books, even though they're both creator owned. Like, one is much more playful, and the other one is this angsty cry of this Jumanji meets angst monster. But I'm lucky. But what the best thing about comics to me is that you don't have to choose. It's like in novels, you kind of have to sort of commit for a very long period of time for one piece of work. Whilst comics, I can be more promiscuous. You know what I mean? No, that makes, jump around a little bit. Yeah.
So you mentioned something that we hadn't touched on, and this is something I was specifically told I had to ask you because we have a big fan. Phonogram. Are we going to see any more of that?
Very unlikely. I only say very unlikely because I'm allergic to the word never. Because you know, anyone says anything for sure about the future is just lying to you. Sure. And I think this year has taught us that more than anything. But I think it's very unlikely. It was such about a period of me and Jamie's life, and that feels like, I mean, Wick Diff ceremonially sort of ended that, what I count as quote unquote youth, and no, I just can't think any reasonable way of ever doing it. The exception would be, it wouldn't be phonogram. What it would be like, I would use a phonogram-esque idea elsewhere. You know what I mean? Because phonogram is really a philosophy, a piece of philosophy. I can't say the word philosophy. Wow. It is a thinky work, which is about how I see the world, or how, you know.
Right.
So those ideas find other ways out. I mean, there's a story I wanted to do. I've said this in interviews before, I think, but there's a story I wanted to do which set in a night. Yep, the second phonogram was set in a single nightclub on a single night. But I got an idea for a story. I want to do a single nightclub across 40 years or 50 years, and basically do like one episode every like 7 or 8 years. So you see people get, so because especially in a small town, there might only really be one club. So use it as a sort of a social history, a generational history about this town and people having kids, their kids turning up, you know, and then you sort of see life across that. And that's clearly a phonogram idea. But at the same time, that idea doesn't need phonogram. And, you know, I would find a way to write about that in different ways. But things,
okay, you know, it makes sense.
Yeah. But no, unfortunately not. But, you know, I think I've probably done everything I need to do about music for a while. Actually, I'm lying. There's a book that might happen next year, which is very music and magic based. It's not phonogram, but we'll see if that actually happens or not.
Well, so this is another thing, you know, follow up with my phonogram question. I mean, music, I mean, to everybody, I think is kind of important, but I think for at least this has been my read as you've created playlists for some of your comics and things like that. Music is incredibly important to you.
Yeah, I mean, like, I often have trouble with the idea of saying something is more important to me than anyone else, because I don't like judging anybody else's, you know, I don't like putting passion on a scale, but like most music could be, but with that caveat, music is sort of a thing that integrates in my life in a way that's really hard to sort of see past, as in, you know, how I think about music and how I use that as a device to think about other objects. I mean, I use it, Wick in the Vine was like, I feel like, I was going to say pinnacle, I almost said end point. It was the something, maybe climax of that way of thinking. Like Wick Div has this, like the playlist is like nearly 500 songs long. And what I did, I used it as a tarot deck. I basically put it on shuffle and I listened to it almost all the time. And since all those songs connect with different characters, it made me examine the story in different ways. So like, it was a device to think about it. And of course, now I'm writing Die, I've done a sort of spin-off RPG, which is available in a beta form online. And that's almost the same thing in the way that by writing the RPG, I'm finding another way of thinking about Die from a different angle. So it's all like different tactics. But like, you know, there is a Die playlist. I mean, at the same time, I do not love, that's not true. I'm not as obsessed by music as I was like when I was 27 or whatever, you know. So like, but at the same time, music, despite the fact I know how much I felt about music in a certain time and place, I cannot deny how much music is still there. You know what I mean?
Right, absolutely. So that was going to be my next question. What are you listening to right now? Like, what's on your first place?
I said I hate that question because it's like people ask me that, and my brain automatically freezes up.
It's like, weirdly, what's your favorite movie? I don't know. There's a bunch.
Yeah, it's like let me just genuinely turn to like my playlist I was listening to earlier. I was the new Idols album I was listening to earlier, which I really like. Idols. Are they Bristol? I think they're Bristol. A Bristol-based band, and they're just really loud, sort of post-McCluskey, shouty math rock band with really. I mean, I wish they were around when I was a teenage boy. They've got really a good approach to like being alive. Then I've given you one. That's a good answer.
The Idols, that's good. We're listening to the Idols. I will check them out as soon as we're done.
They're good
today.
Also, I mean, so I'm scrolling down the list. I've really got into the Prefab Sprout 1985 album, Steve McQueen, which I've never listened to before. And I've been listening to it a lot this week. And I wrote I mean, you know, so occasionally, that's the thing about, there's also there's always stuff you haven't listened to as well. So it's just an endless stream of like really interesting stuff you don't know about. So I'm scrolling. You can sort of tell that I'm scrolling down on the right.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, while you look through that, I have another question to put you on the spot.
Sure.
There's the Wicked and Divine playlist. We've got the Die playlist. If you had to pick an album or at least a few tracks to go along with your Warhammer book, what would we be listening to?
Yeah. Warhammer hasn't got a playlist,
Right.
but I have been listening. I started off by listening to this band. I'm scrolling up. They are Batushka. Are you aware of Batushka? Batushka are like, they do black metal meets Eastern Orthodox chanting. So it's the most heavy operatic stuff. It's like it's a lot, and it is very Warhammer.
How do you spell that?
Batushka.
Batushka. Okay.
Like, and it's like, it's not exactly a pop floor filler, but like that was like when I was getting deep in the dread. That was it. Then later I was a band called Blank Mass, who World Eater, I think that was their album, and they do this kind of like really hard dance, sort of a really aggressive dance music. They're a spin-off of a band called, I apologise, I'm about to swear, Fuck Buttons, but they're like them, but perhaps a bit more intense, I think.
Right.
And I wrote the last episode of Marnius Calgar to literally for my 12-year-old self. I wrote it entirely to Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. So I, awesome. Absolutely embrace teenage metalhead me.
No, I think those are probably 3 really good albums to listen to. I think it captures the theme and kind of the ideas of that universe very, very well. So if you're watching this and you've picked up the Warhammer book and you're used to reading a Kieron Gillen book with a playlist, there you go. We've got Batushka, we've got Black Mass, and we've got Guns N' Roses, which, I mean, the great choices.
That's like, so much of my stuff is like, the music is always about trying to evoke the mood or some kind of feeling, you know what I mean?
Right.
And just, but at the same time, it's also about putting yourself in the mental space, because like when the Wicked playlist comes on, I know, it's time to write Wicked, or something like the Die play. So in other words, it's almost like a Pavlov response. Like, I mean, there's a weird thing is that sometimes I can't even explain it very well. I was like listening to, I don't listen to it all the time when I'm writing Eternals. I'm listening to a lot of ABBA when I'm writing Eternals, and that
okay.
Like, it may be just because ABBA's haircuts are very similar to Icarus's haircuts, if you look.
Sure.
But like, it's not like poppy ABBA. There's sort of sadder bits of ABBA. There's something quite, sad about eternal beings, maybe. I just don't know, but it's somehow, at the very least, becomes kind of Pavlovian. So,
I mean, I know you mentioned the sadder bit. I mean, is that like maybe a kind of a hint at what kind of tone we're going to see in the new Eternals book?
It's like, tone's interesting because it's like, because Esad is obviously, I still can't believe I'm working with Esad. Esad is one of my favorite artists. I don't think there's a better fantasy, like modern fantasy artist working in America today. And he just, that kind of the scale and the distance and that anything that feels that big always appears to be slightly sad to me. And and Esad also does great physicality, and it's also, he does absolute pure heavy metal. But there's a sort of what's the word? It's like an epitaph mode. It's like an elegy. It feels kind of, his work always feels a little bit like melancholy to me.
Sure.
So there's certainly that. I mean, there's something intrinsically sad about people who are alive forever and can't change. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I wanted, it's got a weird pop energy the book has as well. So despite all, it's got lots of sci-fi notes, but it's also got a playfulness. Like, and it's one of these things that I didn't want it to just feel like, obviously Esad did the amazing one with Jason on 4, and I didn't want it to feel like 4. I wanted, just because these aren't gods. So it's got a very different end. It's like part of it feels very tacky, then also parts of it feel very playful. Like there's jokes, they're likable people to hang out with. But at the same time, it's also quite alien. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I say all those different sort of flavors to it. It's all pleasure phrases. Despite all those different flavors, I think it comes together into something quite coherent. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
Because it feels very much like the Marvel Universe, because the Marvel Universe contains a lot of things. It's one of the things like, Marvel Universe is both Squirrel Girl and the Punisher,
Right. It's like when you mix savory and sweet together and how it shouldn't work, but it does very well sometimes.
I mean, there's like I hope, I can't wait for people to read it. I was actually reading issue 1 today again, and it's got a lot of different notes. And I'm really excited by it.
So it's not unfair to say you're one of the most successful comic book writers working today. I mean, you have books that go, for example, Once and Future, I think, to went to like 6 or 7 printings for the first issue.
8 or something, like something really.
Yeah,
really
it was obscene. How do you personally measure your success, like, for yourself?
I think it's all. That's a hard question. Like, just most of my friends spend most of their time mocking me. You know what I mean? So I have trouble thinking myself like that. So on some level, you always think you're a fraud. At the same time, I know in very pure material terms, I'm enormously successful.
Right.
I just, especially when I come from a very working class background. I've worked building sites. My family were builders. That's the kind of, and I was the first kid in my extended family to go to university, and that's my kind of background. So
Sure.
Any idea of writing for a living would be a win. So it's always quite hard for me to judge that, because the fact I feel like somehow cheated life, that ties in.
Right.
But really, it's like, for me, okay. All those things are things you bear in mind, especially because you try not to think about them. Then if you don't think about them, you realize you end up overstepping and failing to realize the weight your steps carry. Because it's like, right. It's the awful thing. If I walk into a room at certain parties, look, people get weird. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I don't mean that in an egotistical way. It's like, because I'm a puppy dog. I automatically like everybody, so I don't always recognize. Oh, you know what I mean? So a lot of it's about you keep people around you as well who try to tell you how it is. But really, for me, it's always about you say I don't feel I'm a success. My work has still not done everything I want it to do. It's done a lot of things I'm very proud of.
Sure.
But everything is failure. My favorite book of the Bible when I was a Catholic school kid was Ecclesiastes, in that kind of all is futile. And that kind of, I'm very aware that since my work tends to circle bittersweet feelings, you know what I mean? No matter, all great positive feelings are slightly touched by the fact that we will die. Those two things are I'm genuinely an optimist, but at the same time there is the sadness to it. So that might impact how I view my work, but I'm always looking for the next thing. Is the thing if I get bored, that's when it gets bad. I'm not very good when I get bored.
No, fair enough. Well, I was way too spontaneous. I imagined I would get there. So let me ask you this. We had kind of touched on how Warhammer it's a much bigger thing in the UK than it is here in the US. We have, like I said, we have some great communities. Flip side of that coin, comics, we're much bigger here than they are in the UK. Is that that's correct, right?
Definitely. Comics are. There's not really a homegrown British comic scene. I said before, there is actually a really good comic shop now in Stafford, but when I grew up, there was no comic shop where I lived. We had to go to Birmingham, which was the nearest big city, to get comics. And I didn't buy American comics when I was a kid. My best mate, he was the person who read comics. And so I was going to Birmingham, and that's also where the nearest Games Workshop was. So that kind of our pilgrimages to Birmingham, geek pilgrimages to get our stuff. Yeah.
So where if you didn't, I mean, you guys do have a lot of long running comics. You have 2000 AD and stuff like that. Where does your exposure to Marvel and the greater American comics universe happen?
It's interesting. I can only talk about, because some people in cities generally have better access, and in the 80s, because I read comics. I didn't read comics as a teenager. I read a few comics, but I wasn't a reader. I read comics as a kid, and the ones you read in Britain are basically either stuff like 2000 AD, or the Beano, which is or British kids comics, or Marvel UK did reprints of American comics. And this is the interesting thing, because it was let's say one of them was Secret Wars, and so it included Secret Wars in it, and it probably included something from the 1970s and also something from the 60s. So you might have I mean, I remember like it's like 1960s Thor with 1970s Machine Man with Spider-Man. You know what I mean? And you had all these three completely. So you learn the shape of the Marvel universe, but you have no idea how it all ties together. And that's the funny. That's like weirdly. It's I think one reason why I've always worked more. You know, I've only ever worked at Marvel really. Is that I just kind of know the shape of it more. You know what I mean? So like, I was always interested. So you know, I followed Spider-Man and you know the Secret Wars and all that kind of stuff. And you know, my best mate, I read his comics. So that was the kind of way you did it. But it's tricky because I reckon if I had more access to comics, I would have probably been into them earlier. Because I've always kind of, if someone gave me them, I would always be like, I got access to them. I would read them voraciously. You know.
Right. So now you mentioned that, you know, I asked you the question about how you measure your personal success, and you said your friends make fun of you. I mean, do you ever respond with like, hey, go to the US, find a comic book nerd. They know who I am. Like, do you ever just like mic drop on them?
No, I would literally, no, I'm not sure I can handle it. I think I'm quite used to teasing. Like my family are teasers, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, it's not necessarily an emotionally healthy way to express love for people via mocking them.
Yeah.
But
no,
at the same
absolutely.
time, that's an energy I'm very comfortable with. I'm very, you know, if you look for the people across my life who I have ended up in relationships with, they're normally people who don't put up with my nonsense. You know, and at the same time, they also respect what I do. You know, as in like there's a push and pull between people being quote unquote proud of me, and I'm also very needy for praise. But you know what I mean? No, and also like I really like the people. I'm sure I how to phrase this. I'm really into. I tend to have the people I've been lucky enough to surround my life with are often really creative and really interesting. So I'm always like I can feel people. There's a treatment of people like peers in terms of like if somebody starts talking to me about what they're doing creatively, I will automatically talk to them with utter seriousness about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yeah. Absolutely.
It's like, especially because my background, like I talk about the way I came up, and especially in music, I was a fanzine writer. So I did black and white photocopied fanzines, and we just did it ourselves. And when I got into comics, I started. I did my own black and white photocopied fanzines again. So the idea of just setting up and doing it, and everyone's creativity just being kind of like equal, and that's always been very important. The democracy about this kind of stuff. There's interviews in the back of Die, and Alex Roberts, who is the designer of the wonderful game for the Queen, interviewing Die, and she has a line that stuck with me. And she's talking about one of the wonderful things about indie games, RPGs generally, but specifically like indie RPGs, is that they prove that creativity is infinite. And like we kind of like fetishize storytellers, and you know, and obviously I earn money from that process. But at the same time, if you sit down with a good indie RPG with your friends, you can make a fascinatingly wonderful world in an evening. You know, and that's kind of like, and that's always been what I've tried to do as a creator. Like I'm very into worlds which kind of give you the permission. Like Wick Div was like, think of yourself as a god for a while. The Phonogram was, just think about you loving music as being like magic. You know, and like like the concepts of books being something me and Jamie talk about is art as a gateway. We're always into bands and musicians and creators and books and everything, which were doorways to other books. And you know that kind of like for all as much as I love hermetically sealed universes, for me it's always like go read all this. And you see this in some of my work. There's so much research and like, oh, I've gone and read this book about this. I want to tell you about it. You know, and it's you probably get. I think if people, when I'm in this sort of mood, you sort of sense the utter nerd, me trying to sort of. Part of me, I think, is always the 13-year-old nerd who's trying to tell everybody about that awesome D&D campaign. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, and I honestly, in a lot of ways, I think that does show through your work. You can really see the things that you personally are passionate about. But the great thing is that the things you're passionate about, there are a lot of us out there that are passionate about. So it resonates very, very well. I mean, my first exposure to you was Wick Div. That I love that book. And then from there, you know, Die and Once and Future. I mean, those are recent examples, but Phonogram and now Warhammer, which is, it's when I found out you were writing Warhammer book, I was like, oh, cool. One of my favorite writers is writing about one of my favorite things at one of my favorite publishers. I can't imagine how this could be any better. So I don't want to keep you up all night. I know it is now the very late hour there in the UK. But Kieron, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this. Hopefully you could come back and see us again when we get closer to the Eternals.
That'd be lovely. Yeah. I'll just say, as a final thought, as in like the stuff I do and the stuff I love is like the ability to sort of express what you're passionate about, and seeing someone else express what they're passionate about is, I've always found that encouraging. So that kind of like, especially early with Phonogram, and this is, to be honest, entirely our own fault. People got the idea we're trying to be too cool, and it was like, it was never about being cool. It's always about saying, we love this stuff.
Right.
And like, tell me about what you love. And that's the kind of the idea of like culture, is that kind of sharingness of it. It's something that's always been meaned a lot. And that's what I like about the best stuff I see in comics is always about the enthusiasm, where someone comes up with you and say, oh, I'm really into your book. And then like the joy is like, quite often my peers, I'm like, oh my God, I love their stuff. You know? And it's like,
yeah.
You know, we do it because we care, you know? And that's, I think, both readers and creators and all that, you know. I appear to be a hippie this evening. I'm very sorry.
No, this has been great. This is I always try to picture like what the interviews will be like, or I try to go and find other interviews that you guys have done in the past, so that I don't tread a lot of the same ground, or if I'm going to tread the same ground, like, you know, put a spin on it. But this has been awesome. This is probably one of my all-time favorite forums. So again, thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been amazing.
Guys, we will be back at 6 p.m. Eastern time with Alex Packendell and with John Lee, sorry, the artist and the writer of the upcoming Volt book, Giga. Very exciting book about giant robots. We all love giant robots. So guys, I will see you at 6 p.m. Kieron, again, have a great night's sleep, and thank you for doing the forum.
Bye, everyone.